Okay, let's get started. So thanks for joining us today, everyone. If you're not familiar with us, Taboola is the world's largest discovery platform. Over 20,000 companies use us to reach over 1.4 billion people every month. We're here today to talk about sponsored content, creative, and best practices. We're really excited to have you all. Now, before we get started, I wanted to go over a few housekeeping items. So as we're talking, on the right-hand side of the screen in the GoToWebinar control panel, there's a questions module. Feel free to ask us any questions throughout the webinar, and when we're finished at the end, we're going to try to get to as many questions as we can. If you'd like to tweet us, you can use the hashtag Taboola Insights, and we'll try to respond to as many as we can. Joining us today is MVF Global's head of CDN, Luke Watkin, and myself, Rachel Zalta. I'm really excited to have him, or to have you, Luke. Let me turn it over to Luke to get started.
Thanks so much, Rachel. It's a pleasure to be here with you today, as always. Delighted to be part of this really awesome Taboola Insights webinar series. I've been a big fan since it started. A little bit about myself. Yes, I've been in the digital marketing game for going on 9-10 years now. Made my way through various areas of lead generation, email marketing, Facebook ads, that kind of thing, and found my home really in many ways at MVF last year. So MVF, what do? We provide a scalable source of new customers to businesses all over the world. Our technology and world-class cross-channel marketing teams help connect active customers with businesses looking to scale, providing quality sales-ready leads directly to our clients on a pay-per-lead basis. And the other thing to mention really is MVF is in many ways proof that fast growth and responsible business go hand in hand. So in the last few years, we've topped the tech track as the fastest growing tech company in the UK. We've earned the Queen's Award for Enterprise twice. And just a couple of months ago, we were actually voted the best company in the UK to work for on the Sunday Times Best Company list. So we're all very proud of the work that we do, and I certainly am myself.
That's awesome. That's super impressive.
Thank you.
Cool. So I'm Rachel Zalta. I'm Taboola's Global Research and Insights Lead. My background's in psychology, so you might hear me have some, comments from the psychological perspective. I've been in Taboola for almost 5 years, and what I do for Taboola is I study online behavior based on the billions and billions of recommendations that we have worldwide. Feel free to reach out if you have any questions on LinkedIn or on Twitter. So for whoever of you are not familiar, Taboola, you've seen Taboola before for sure. You would see us if you go on your favorite publisher site and you finish reading an article, and at the bottom of the article, you would see an infinite feed of recommended content. It includes images and titles and different videos. So that's kind of where you would see us.
Yeah, so I wanted to just kind of kick things off a little bit with a focus on native advertising and what makes it special, what makes it unique. So at MVF, one of our key advantages is the scope and the diversity of our marketing mix. So as well as native, we're very strong on paid social, so Facebook and Instagram and so on, and on Google search. As well as this, we have an emerging paid media team working on platforms as diverse as LinkedIn, Twitter, Pinterest, and Snapchat, plus a whole new channels team looking at things like TikTok and apps. So this gives us tremendous scope and scale to figure out what type of marketing works for our audiences, and the rate and the speed that we can test and get kind of creative wins is incredible. But what we're really interested in is what makes it special. So I think above all, our ads appear on trusted sites, whether that's news content or other content. People seeing our ads are looking for information and are receptive to messaging. I'd say this is our great strength. While we compete for budgets with those kind of first-party data-rich platforms like Facebook and Google, and the targeting advantages those platforms are best with, the importance of our creativity and the intelligence of our messaging is really paramount. So understanding the data that we have at our disposal from Taboola is essential. And so what is it about certain ads or messaging that makes people respond? In particular at the moment with the current kind of global environment, coronavirus and so on. This really is at the forefront of our minds and of our audience's minds. So we'll cover that in more detail a little later.
All right, that's super interesting. And one of the things that I always ask myself, Luke, when I study the creatives that work well on the native platform is, is this only true for native? Is this also true for other channels? So it's definitely interesting to see, what the differences and the similarities are to online behavior on different, different channels. So yeah, I think that's really cool. So I like to start, this presentation, or we're going to be focusing on creatives in general. But before that, there's a study that is really important, I think, to bring up, that talks about how many brand messages we see in one day, in 24 hours. So Luke, I don't know if did you see the answer on the slide before?
I may have seen the answer. I'm prepared to play
So the answer here is actually really crazy. We see an average of 10,000 brand messages in one day. When I saw this, I was like, wait, is that a mistake? And I read into it a little bit more, and it looks like brand messages are not only ads, brand messages are also logos, right? So we're exposed to many, many logos and ads, and different brands that are trying to convey some kind of message to us throughout our day. And I did a little bit of math, and 10,000 brand messages in 24 hours, if I sleep around 8 hours, what it translates to is that in every given minute, there are 10 different brands trying to say something to me, or that are being exposed to me at that 1 minute. And what this means for the consumer is that there's a lot of information out there. And what it means for the marketers is that we need to do a really good job to grab that user's attention, because the landscape is very busy, right? There are so many other brands at the same time trying to get the user's attention. How do we win? How do we win that attention? And so it's an important thing to keep in mind, I think. And I like to think about it every time I choose creatives, right? If I'm going to choose an image right now, let's remember that there are a lot of other brands at the same time trying to reach the consumer, and we kind of need to stick out. So I like to kind of start with that. And Luke, I'll pass it on to you to talk a little bit about COVID.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Rachel. So yeah, it is really incredible, that last stat, and it's a wonder how any of us get anything done with that amount of branding in our site all the time. I mentioned before the kind of current world situation, and I know that fellow marketers listening to this will be thinking about this themselves all the time, as they should be. So I think a nice way of putting it is that in marketing, we must kind of strive to find a balance in our messaging that straddles two very different truths. One being that people, our audience, have excess spare time currently, a lot of them do, and want to find relief and distraction from a lot of bad news. On the other hand, they're also dealing with potentially unprecedented levels of stress and loss. So how we manage these two parallel realities will in many cases be the difference between our success and failure. I think advertisers in native, using Taboola, are in a unique position. We're kind of seeing that surplus and often cheaper impressions at the moment, with so much kind of traffic going through Taboola's publishers, can make opportunism appear tempting. But I think brands seem to be taking advantage at the current time, are at risk of suffering from permanent loss of consumer trust. So we expect certainly that brands putting short-term profit and success first will be ultimately the losers in this. At MVF, we're really very much looking at the long term. So whilst recognizing our clients and our audiences, they still need each other even now. We're really thinking a little further ahead. So we're very proud of having a business conduct committee, BCC. We're really strong on compliance and making sure our advertising is ethical, and that's something we've done for years, but now more than ever is really crucial, putting that kind of sensitivity before profit. Of course, this really largely varies also by vertical. So one of MVF's key verticals for years has been funeral planning. So we have FPA approved funeral plans. It's a really good product. But in current circumstances, even though we've been running this product for years, it could, of course, appear to the first-time viewer to be an opportunistic kind of angle. And there are many, unfortunately, less scrupulous advertisers around seeking advantage, so we do have to be extra sensitive. We have levels of compliance whereby our CRO and our director of PR will, check every ad that we run. But also, like, our team, I'm lucky to manage like a really ethical and kind of team that has really strong values and knows our values and will automatically kind of sense check and review our ads themselves. I thought rather than just kind of talk on about how great we are, it'd be good to look at some real examples. So taking a look at how to adjust your strategies, your ad headlines and your different angles for speaking to people in this change world we're talking about. Important to remember, every single impression at the moment is someone who's probably thinking about current events to a lesser or greater extent. So some just mildly, others very anxious. And we found that our marketing needs to be sensitive to this. So the feeling is, as I mentioned before, generally we can take advantage of high levels of traffic without, let's say, forcing the issue with any potentially risky ad copy. And likewise, clarity of messaging and what is and isn't appropriate is vital. So in the UK, with our National Health Service, the NHS, that would be something that we would not mention at all, in particular, particularly in relation to health or senior products. So pitting, the National Health Service against private medical products would obviously be a big no. At the same time, we have found plenty of success in referencing the situation, either directly or indirectly. So ads that mention working from home, how to achieve something without leaving the house, or how to complete a process over the phone, they tend to work well. They may have lower click-through rates initially, but the conversion rates really, really make up for that on the back end. So we're looking at the whole picture. On a top level, we've established some key themes to apply to our marketing, which are along the lines of resilience, cost saving, support, and how we can help. The kind of remote capability angle, and also just a reminder that we're very much open for business. So in this example, in the blue box, we've molded those themes into a kind of 3-point landing page banner. This specific example is for a vehicle tracking services product, but we want to equally apply those themes to all verticals. So as with all marketing, testing and tracking is very much the key. So we'll have internal dashboards to track and showcase examples of any working from home kind of keyword content, and track how these perform versus regular ads.
Yeah, and I think the work that you guys are doing is really, really important. Being sensitive to what everybody else is going through and kind of coming from a really ethical and respectful place. I'm really all about that too in Taboola. This was a really interesting, so IAB, they just released this coronavirus ad spend impact. And they, this is a quote from them that I think is really important, like for everyone, but especially, to people listening to this webinar. So those channels with greater flexibility and agility in creating, editing, and optimizing creative will experience less of an impact. So in my experience at Taboola, the clients that we have that are, most willing to test creatives and optimize their creatives are usually the more successful clients. But I think this is especially true during these days. And it's kind of what you were talking about, Luke. And it's, what we're going to be talking about in the rest of this webinar. So before we get started on the actual best practices, one thing that I always like to bring is data. So in Taboola, and I'm sure, in MVF as well, every decision that we make always has to be based on data. And one of the things that we put together is this website called Trends, Taboola Trends. It's trends.taboola.com. And what we have on this website is a regular analysis of every single one of the items that run in our network to create best practices. So what we found is that the best practices are always changing. What people are clicking on is always changing. And therefore, we needed to create a website that is always changing with the behaviors and not just, a static PDF of best practices. And what you can see here is image best practices. So what types of images are working well in our network right now. And we also have keyword trends. So what kinds of keywords are trending right now? And then we have this tool that I find extremely helpful that we call either the title analyzer or the title predictive tool. And what you do in this tool is you can put in different titles actually before you test them live. And you can see which title has a higher predictive CTR based on Taboola's algorithm. So definitely relying on data before you go ahead and test would probably be the best first step. And then, keeping in mind all the data and the trends that we see, this is what we usually focus on when we talk about creatives. So in order to succeed from the creative perspective, you need people to notice your item, right? So you can be scrolling down a page and you could not even look towards a specific image or title. So the first step is getting people to look. The step after that is getting people to click. And then after people click, then you're gonna ask them to take some kind of action. Now, of course, you can't take action if you didn't click, and you can't click if you haven't noticed. So really, each one of these steps is really crucial for the success of any kind of campaign. So what we're going to do now is we're going to go over a few best practices for each one of these steps in the funnel. So the first is noticing. One of the things that we see in our network a lot is that people are always doing really, really well. If you go on Taboola Trends right now, you'll see that I think people have a 56% increase in CTR. This is a really important thing to include in your images. There's a lot of psychology behind this. So if I was stuck in this room that I am in right now with a lion, who would survive, me or the lion? Probably the lion. But what happens when I meet a friend, Luke, and other friends, together we create a community, and communities of people are able to build defenses against dangerous things like lions. So part of what helped humans survive were their social ties, and are our social ties. And because of this, we're constantly looking for other humans. We're doing this offline. When we walk into a room, the first thing we do is look to see who else is there. And we do it online too. When we're scrolling down a page, if we see a person, our eye is going to go there automatically first. So if we're talking about that first stage, how do we grab attention? Using pictures of people, especially emotional people, and especially people who are looking directly at the camera, which feels to the viewers as if they're looking directly at us. Those are the types of pictures that are going to do really well because they're going to get a lot of attention.
I think that's absolutely right, and it's something that we find time and time again. And I'll talk more about how certain MVF employees are often the star of the show in some of our own ads. But just on another theme, slightly different, I wanted to just kind of talk about the product shots that we've been using in our ads a lot lately. So a few examples here for some vehicle tracking, some hearing aids, and some solar panels. Over the years, we found that kind of stock imagery that your audience has maybe seen potentially advertise a variety of other totally different products is not going to be the key to your success. So we say kind of leverage stock by all means, but making your product itself the kind of the centerpiece can be a very powerful combination. So we have a very diverse range of verticals, both product-based and service-based, but we found a lot of success in kind of putting the products themselves front and center, and getting your audience, thinking about those products before they even probably know kind of what they're all about.
Yeah, and I think, one thing that I'm noticing from these images is that a lot of them have hands on them, right? So like someone's holding the product. So I wonder what you guys are seeing on your end in terms of like someone holding the product versus only the product, what works better? I know that yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, yeah, so no, it's definitely a theme that you'll probably notice throughout this presentation. The kind of angle of holding this product, it gives it a kind of tangibility that just a kind of solo product shot on a plain background just doesn't really give you. So I guess as the behavioral psychologist, Rachel, you could probably explain why that might be, but it's something that really makes people kind of feel instantly connected with it, we find.
Yeah, yeah, totally. And I think that's something that we're definitely seeing on our network too. And we're actually collaborating with a big university in the United States, and we're analyzing our images, but like a year's worth of them, to see if product shots alone do better than someone holding the product shot or a selfie with a product shot. And I have a hunch that we're going to see someone holding the product shot being the best, but I don't actually have the results yet. But yeah, I think this has to do definitely with, feeling more like we can relate to the product when we see a
Yeah,
hand there. And I think it also has to do with, just, people, right? We just spoke about people and how that grabs attention. Even if this isn't like a face, still the human touch is something that definitely works really, really well.
absolutely.
So I'll go over this quickly because I don't think a lot of you can include animals in your creatives. But one thing that we see on our network, especially now, is that animals and pictures do really well. So there are actually a lot of theories about this. There are people that claim that if babies weren't cute, we wouldn't have survived. And part of what helped babies survive, babies being, humans that really need other humans to take care of them. Part of what helped them survive is the fact that they were so cute. And there is a lot of research actually that shows that the same areas in our brains that's activated when we fall in love or when we eat chocolate are active when we see cute pictures. So if we're trying to grab attention using cute pictures of animals or of babies or anyone else, that could be a really great way to kind of grab that attention. Colors are really interesting too. So a lot of times when I'll ask people what kind of colors they think will do better, they'll usually say like, bright colors, red, those kind of colors. And we found, a little bit of a different results. Again, there are a lot of theories that talk about specific colors being related to different emotions. So like red is angry and purple is disgusted. But this actually has not been backed up by scientists. What has been backed up by scientists is that when you use colors that are different than their surroundings, that's when they're going to stick out more. So it's not that red always works better, but if you had a red dot and a black surrounding, then our eye is going to go directly to that red dot. But if we see the opposite, right, red all over and then a little black dot, our eye is going to go towards that black dot. So trying to be different than everybody else is going to work. Black and white is really interesting because black and white images work pretty well very often, but then sometimes what we find is that a lot of advertisers start using black and white, and then black and white isn't special anymore, right? It's not different anymore. So then black and white kind of goes down in its CTR impact. So one trick is to kind of look at the different publishers that you're going to appear in, see what kind of colors you're seeing there mostly, and then try to use a different color, like a bright, different color that other people aren't using.
I think that's a really, really good point actually, Rachel, and in particular the kind of trends element of the color psychology. So you will certainly see, I believe, kind of it'll go in cycles. So you will notice a lot of creatives that are focusing on black and white, and then perhaps there'll be some element of ad fatigue or saturation. We actually kind of have like a small project team within our native team who are dedicated to kind of market research, competitor research. So we call them the trend squad, and what we'll find is like we'll see like a certain kind of trend emerging on the creative kind of aspect, and then it will very much kind of come and go. So obviously a big thing is to kind of set the trends yourselves and be ahead of the curve. But yeah, I just thought it was really interesting that you referenced that.
Yeah, and I like this trend squad. That's very cool.
They are very cool people.
Cool. So another thing that, of course, will grab attention are videos or any type of animation. And before I talk about videos, Luke, why don't you go ahead?
Yeah, sure. So I just wanted to kind of say a few words on GIFs, the kind of unsung heroes of advertising. So GIFs, I find, are a very effective way of bridging the gap between regular, sponsored content, image-based creative, and video. So in performance marketing, we've, video means running without sound and maybe will only support short loops anyway. So GIFs kind of allow us to tell an animated story about our products very, very simply and often very effectively. So just three examples here for market research surveys for laser eye surgery and for solar panels. So in combination with strong ad headlines, these GIFs offer a really powerful opportunity to grab the attention. So we're seeing results both in our click-through rates and further down the funnel that really show that these type of creatives can work. So for example, this soda GIF has shown I think something like a 300% conversion rate uplift. I think perhaps because we've begun telling the story of our product higher up the funnel and our audience is responding by displaying higher intent to convert. And just in the formulation of this, where with the kind of battery there and then the pound symbols coming out, it's telling you, you're saving money, you're actually making money from these solar panels, and I think that's a really powerful image. Likewise, the kind of the hearing aids with the blurry and then the clear. Yeah, we're big fans of them.
Yeah, so I'm going to talk about video from a little bit of a different perspective, but I love this. I think this is super powerful. It's like you said, right? We're kind of conveying the story before they even click. And that way you're also filtering, you're attracting the right audience, which will
Absolutely.
hopefully convert for you also. So I think that's really awesome.
Absolutely, and it goes back to what we were saying before about native versus other channels. If you're a Google search advertiser, you've got people with high intent actively searching for your products. Paid social on Facebook, you may have a little more real estate on the page. But what we've got is, by being creative, we're opening the kind of the story up to our audience sooner, and we're seeing results. So I would recommend.
Wow, that's awesome. So we're doing, similar but a little bit different. Taboola has a creative shop studio, and we take a lot of images and we're animating them so that there's some kind of movement. And I'll talk about why movement is really important. This is just one example. So we're just taking a regular image and zooming in on a specific detail of that image, and that kind of makes you feel curious, like what is that detail? And it also is just a great way to grab attention. So that's just an example from our end. And this is what I kind of wanted to talk about from the video perspective, is that from the psychological perspective, or maybe not psychological, survival perspective, if I was in the jungle and there was something moving, I would have to notice that movement really, really quickly in order to survive. So all animals actually have an instinct to always look towards things that are moving. Again, this is true offline and it's also true online. And so if we're scrolling down a page, studies show that it's almost impossible for us to ignore any kind of video or animated object. Now, of course, we don't want to be annoying, right? We don't want to annoy people with like tons of movement and not allow them to concentrate on an article. But if we're in a place that is not interruptive, and we can just include a little bit of movement to kind of grab that attention and tell the story, to kind of tell the story before they click, I think that could be really, really powerful. And we're seeing some awesome results on our end also. Okay, so we spoke about different strategies of how do we get people's attention. So now let's assume that everybody has looked towards your item. How do we get them to click? And so here there are a lot of strategies as well.
So I mentioned earlier briefly the kind of making the MVF guys the star of the show in some cases, and I thought I'd deliver on that. So at MVF we're big fans of the UGC, which is user generated content, where the internal team are the the kind of actors and the models for our ads. And it's actually an absolutely key strategy for us. So literally millions of our leads have come directly from ads featuring MVF employees. And we do have a video and creative services team, but I'd say probably 95% of our ads are made within the team itself. So even working from home, as we are at the moment, we're surfacing big creative wins with just an iPhone, some pretty basic Photoshop and highly creative imaginations. I think probably the key to this is remembering that we're speaking to real people and that really they're just like us. So these ads give something of a natural and homespun feel, which is proven to speak to people. And of course, it's a lot of fun. So we've got Cedric here on the left and Callum on the right, both either current or former members of the CDN team, and they've been responsible for thousands and thousands of leads coming through.
This is amazing. I love this. And it kind of talks to something that we're seeing on Taboola as well, which is being natural or being real. So this is actually true for both of these images. What we see on our end is that images of real people, as opposed to like stock photo or more staged or more professional pictures, are really always working better in every vertical. So in the dating vertical, we see people actually taking selfies, really from their phones. In other verticals, we see people like this, holding different papers. We see just regular people, and that's what works really well on the native platform. And I think it talks to one of the things that you were mentioning before, Luke, about the native platform. So usually people are on a website, they read an article, and they're not really in the mood to click on, or they're not necessarily in the mood to click on an ad, but they may be in the mood to click on an article, and this article might be about a brand. But they want to click on an ad on an article that is authentic, that is real. If they see a stock photo picture here, it's going to automatically turn them off and tell them, wait, this is an ad. And they might not click just because of that. So we're definitely seeing the same trend, and I think it's so cool that you guys are, using your own people's pictures. Like maybe I should take a picture, and you should try that out too. I don't know if you want to.
Rachel, you're very welcome to. We can run an A/B test of your face versus one of our team, and we'll see which performs better. But it's absolutely true. The element of authenticity that it creates is very powerful, and it's something that I think stock photography just can't really compete with.
Yeah. And I think it brings us to this point, which is, banner blindness. So this is an eye tracking study where somebody is on a page, and then, they're looking for content. They're looking for an article. And when there's a banner ad or something that looks like a banner ad, we're automatically actually ignoring it. So this is, there are many studies about this. And what we try to recommend to our clients is to try to choose images that feel, again, real and feel less like a banner. So here's another cool strategy. I'm sure this is not a surprise to anybody that's listening to this webinar. So here, what we're talking about is increasing a sense of urgency by adding a limited time offer to our title. So like in the example on the left, until March 28th, free gorgeous pouch, as opposed to not having the until March 28th. And what happens when we add a limited time offer is that people, get excited. They realize they can't buy this or get this if they wait too long, and that gets more people to click and to convert. The reason why I include this in this deck isn't because this is a surprising technique, but because I think a lot of the brands that we work with sometimes will have a limited time offer on their page, on their article, but they won't remember to take that limited time offer and add it to their creative, to their title. And I think this is something that I've seen that works really, really well. And it's something that if you have a limited time offer, make sure to take advantage and use it in your creative. And here's another example. So I don't know, do you speak German? I don't know if you speak German.
I've tried learning German lately. I wouldn't be able to translate that for you, I'm afraid.
Okay, so I don't speak German, but there is something here that is different between the two titles. Even if you don't understand German, you could still notice it, and that's the price. So here, this is some kind of, shaving subscription, and it's really not expensive. And what happens when we have a price that's a low price point is that we're going to get more clicks. And this is, pretty obvious. When we have low price points, we'll get more clicks. We're going to talk soon about what happens when we have a high price point. Here's another example. So here we're talking about focusing on the impact that your product or your service is going to make. So instead of just a list of the 20 best things to do during lockdown, saying something like these small habits can make this lockdown the best time of your life is much more powerful, and it gets a lot more attention. And then this is something that we're seeing on our network as well a lot. And I'm sure, Luke, you're probably seeing it as well. But let me know. And that's increasing the sense of trust by calling out different experts. So here, how to strengthen your immune system every day, top surgeon explains, as opposed to just 10 tips to strengthen your immune system. And so calling out experts like this top surgeon, or like, I've seen titles like the French government is doing this, or according to the reviews, calling out different experts or, different reviews is something that we find that works very, very well, especially during these days.
Yeah, that's totally true, and it's something that we've experimented on our article pages as well. In fact, where our Grace, our PR director, kind of built a relationship with a top surgeon, and who was very happy to kind of help us with our advertising for, I think it was either a hearing aids or a laser eye surgery campaign. Mm-hmm. Just building that level of trust is something that's really important to people who, let's face it, there's not all advertisers are selling something that would potentially enrich our lives. Having this kind of additional layer of trust is really important.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Sorry, my mouse got stuck.
So another quite powerful technique I find is tapping into people's kind of sense of themselves. So what we might call flattering our audience. So we found that sometimes all it takes is one extra little adjective and our message becomes much more appealing to our audience. So the example here on the right, people in Texas are earning money from surveys online, and just adding in clever people in Texas are earning money from surveys online just really kind of speaks to the kind of inbuilt arrogance that humans often have. So we all like to think of ourselves as smart or interesting or clever or unique, and indeed we are. But why shouldn't our marketing tap into this? So we've seen some big upticks in click-through rate by just massaging the ego of our audience.
That's awesome. Cool. Okay, so we spoke about the first stage. We spoke about how to grab attention, and then we spoke about how do we get people to click. And now we're in the last stage, which is how do we get people to take action? And here, actually, this has to do a lot, of course, with the landing page and with the article that we're promoting, right? If we do a really good job in the article level to kind of sell our product and pitch our product or our service, then we're going to get more conversions. But what we tried to focus on here were tactics from the creative standpoint. So what can we do from the creatives to kind of increase that chance that we're going to get a higher conversion rate? So that's what we're going to be talking about here. We spoke about the GIFs a little bit. The GIFs increase that conversion rate too, but we're going to talk about a few other strategies. So this is something that I like to start with before going into that. So if you, our audience, if you've seen this title, if you see this title online, what happened next will shock you. With a woman holding a plate of spaghetti, what do you imagine to see post-click? So you might imagine many things. I imagined her moving the bowl and seeing like a big cockroach on it, or I imagined like the bowl exploding everywhere and the spaghetti going everywhere.
Something messy.
Is that what you? Yeah, something messy, right? And then if you clicked on it and you saw something like this, 10 simple ways to eat healthier, how would you feel as a consumer? So Luke, I don't know if you could share if you want, but like usually people would feel really annoyed, right? They're like, what the heck is this? And
I'd
they're,
be,
yeah,
I'd be somewhat confused. It's something that I think about a lot, um, and how we marry up our ads, which we're generally refreshing all the time, and trying to find that next big creative win, and how we align that with our article and indeed the rest of the funnel. It's really important, and we've done tons of research and analysis on this, and we're working now with our conversion team directly to build like a truly aligned funnel. And all evidence points to this being a really essential improvement that we can make to beneficially impact the overall conversion rate.
yeah. Totally. So that's something that like on our end, we're also, we also focus on for sure. So setting that user expectation, making sure that what you think you're going to get from the creative level is actually what you get afterwards. Now, put aside that Taboola's policy would never approve this kind of title. Also, it also just won't convert, right? So it's something that we like to focus on and make sure to mention. Another strategy on this end is to include an action word. So saying something like certificate course, apply now. What happens when we include an action word to our title is this. So I put together a few slides that kind of demonstrate it. So I have a sister who's an artist. And if my sister who's an artist would see this title, certificate course in digital marketing, she might click on it because she knows that her sister, me, I'm in digital marketing. So she wants to find out some of these details for me. So we'll be getting a nice amount of clicks, but out of those clicks, we'll get a small amount of conversions. And what happens when we add an action word like apply now is that my sister, the artist, if she sees this, she's probably not going to click on it, right? So what happens when we add an action word is we get less clicks, right? But out of those clicks, whoever is going to click is actually interested in applying. So we're going to see later on a higher conversion rate, which overall will lower those CPAs and then everyone's kind of happy. So that's a great thing to do. Of course, with those action words, you can test different types of action words, apply now, apply today, sign up or different things.
Yeah, so we've talked about the advantage of preparing our audience for what comes later on, but it works two ways. So there's an advantage to preparing our audience for what comes later on from a client's perspective. So a really cool example here is it's a dash cam client that we have, and it's a really cool example of something our B2B team has been working on. So for a lot of our B2B clients, we work on a tiered pricing basis, whereby our revenue per lead received can vary quite significantly depending on the type or the size of business behind that lead. So in this example for dashcams, we know that businesses that may have only a few trucks in their fleet are not of huge interest to our clients. They're not as valuable. The real money lies in those businesses with more than 5 trucks. So by running headlines specifically calling out those businesses, we saw massive increases in the percentage of businesses that were considered valuable leads. So it's the same principle as the classic, were you born between these states or do you live in this location? We're simply identifying our target audience in our copy and combining it with a strong call to action for why they should click our ad.
Yeah, and just one thought there, we could be also targeting, regular targeting, but I think this is what we call creative targeting in Taboola. When we have this creative targeting and we actually call out our target audience, like 5+ trucks, we're able to get really specific with the type of targeting that we have. And I feel like it's really accurate, right? Like, I don't know what you're seeing on your end, Luke. It sounds like you're also seeing that it's accurate, but people without 5+ trucks aren't clicking. You're really only getting the clicks from those people that are qualified. So it's definitely a great strategy.
Yeah, it's completely true, and it's the kind of it's proven. It'd be surprising perhaps that such a subtle change can make that kind of difference, but it really does. So and just moving on to the following slide, we've seen a huge swing in B2B's importance for MVF, and some of the reasons why and how we feel like we kind of cracked it. So yeah, just kind of literally 2 months ago, pre-coronavirus, granted, but we saw kind of 80% of our revenue made up of B2C products. So that could be anything from the hearing aids to the solar panels, anything B2C. Now, businesses on the whole, we find they don't want sensationalism, they want results, and they want sales-ready leads. So you have to remember from their point of view, every wasted sales call costs them money. So what they want in their leads, and what we can do to ensure for them their leads are as warm as possible, that's the absolute key kind of focus for us. So our focus is on quality and client success. So how we achieve that is through what we might call business headlines. So more sober kind of business language, less sensationalist, less aggressive marketing, and we've really seen huge results. So I kind of mentioned it earlier, but to help our clients, we're adding messaging to our pages that things like their appointments or installations can still take place despite COVID-19. And we're testing lots of messaging in our ads. So there's a couple of examples here, and lots of messaging in our articles and on our landing pages and our web forms. So certainly compared to B2C verticals, we know that very subtle changes in our messaging can produce hugely different results. And that often is the difference between success and failure of a campaign and even of a client relationship, because ultimately, if I'm a business and I'm buying leads that are not valuable to me, I'm not going to keep buying them.
Wow, I think about that also, like, really changing one or two words in a title or changing an image a little bit, that is what makes or breaks a campaign. Like, that's what attracts the right people or doesn't attract the right people. Like, I think it's really powerful, like, to show that a little tiny thing can make such a big difference. So I love that, and I see that on our end too. So before we spoke about what happens when we add a low price point and how that increases CTR, increases clicks. Now this kind of talks about what happens when we have a high price point. So here we have two different titles. On the right, have an extra 90,000 euros. Here's what smart investors say you should do with them. And on the left, just here's what smart investors say you should do with your extra euros. And what happens when we increase that high price point is usually we don't get more clicks like what we see with the low price point. We actually see less clicks, right? Because most people don't have an extra 90,000 euros. So if you don't have it, you just won't click on it. And then the people that are clicking on it, we know that they're usually qualified. And then the chances for them to convert are much higher. So adding a price is always helpful. Sometimes it helps, sometimes it increases the CTR and sometimes it decreases the CTR, but in the end of the day, it's going to be helpful.
I think that's really really strong example, Rachel. Sorry, and it really kind of along the same lines of calling out the businesses with lots of trucks or lots of extra budget spend. You're just honing in on your audience a little bit better, and I may have to be stealing that particular angle myself.
Yeah, go for it. Yeah, I mean, this is all really the same strategy, just like different ways of looking at it. And then like this too, right? So this is if you have an iPhone, right? So assuming we're not targeting iPhone users, just saying if you have an iPhone in your title is going to attract iPhone users, right? And then you'll increase the conversion rate because we know who our audience is and we're calling them out in the title. And like this, you can actually do with anything. So just calling out millennials, right? Saying like millennials are liking this, or people born between this and this year, right? Anything that is calling out your audience is going to increase the chances that the right people are clicking, and then they're going to actually convert. Now, of course, testing is really important. So the strategies and the best practices that we kind of brought you guys today, they work really well, but they won't always work. And they might work really well for a while, and then at a certain point there'll be fatigue and people will get bored of them. And there are cultural differences and consumer or product differences. So really, the thing that's really important is to always keep testing, especially during these days. And that's really what's going to lead to success. So one more thing that I want to talk about is that this is actually, as you probably know, this webinar is part of a series. We've had a bunch of, we had 3 other webinars prior to this one, and we have a lot more coming up. The next one is going to be about video creative and best practices. It's going to be on May 21st. And if you'd like to sign up to listen to the rest of the webinars, feel free to go to explore.taboola.com/taboola-insights-webinars. And yeah, there's really cool content coming up. Okay, so we got to the questions, and I see a lot of questions coming in actually. So one of the, before we actually before we start answering, one question that repeats itself a lot that I'm going to answer right now is if this deck is going to be available. So yes, we're going to send over the deck and the recording to anyone that signed up to the webinar, so you don't have to worry about that. So let's take a quick look. Okay, Luke, I see a question to you.
Lovely.
I read it out. Okay, so how do you manage all of the campaigns? So yeah, it seems like, I mean, we all know that you guys are managing an insane amount of campaigns. How do you actually do it? I think it's a good question.
It is a good question, and and one that I have to think carefully about. So, I mean, my team, the CDN team, MVF, is 18 of us. So it's a big team, and we each have our kind of areas of expertise. So we separate out our campaign groups into kind of B2B, B2C, market research. But on a kind of technical level, I referenced earlier the use of internal dashboards. We use Looker, which helps us to really drill down into, on a very granular level, on a creative level, on a URL level, what's working and what isn't. And this helps to inform a lot of our decisions. So we also have kind of mini project teams working on lots of different things. So I mentioned Trend Squad earlier. We also have a kind of a creative working group focusing on, making GIFs, making videos, new creative themes and angles. We've got, we use Slack for our day-to-day. So we have various Slack bots set up to alert us if there are kind of campaigns spending budget too quickly or any targeting errors. And we usually get alerts like that daily. We spend an awful lot of time on kind of competitor and marketplace research. So we're experienced and we're good at kind of knowing what works already, but it is always interesting to see what others are doing. And I know that certainly from my experience, a lot of competitors are interested in what we're doing as well. I think with going back to the testing, it's important to be bold and don't be afraid to think this looks silly or this looks weird. You've seen a couple of creative examples I've shared today, which probably wouldn't win any advertising creative awards perhaps, but we're not really too fussed about that. And yeah, it's just something that kind of we found our own way over the years. So MVF's been around for over 10 years, and so long before I was around. And we're really, really good at kind of keeping our people kind of challenged and motivated and engaged. And that's something that we hold really, really dear as a business. So I mentioned earlier the Sunday Times Awards for best workplace in the UK. We're really proud of that. And we're really proud of all the things that we do to keep our people happy. So, right now I think we've been working from home for 7 or 8 weeks already. And we've got really creative, talented people who need to be kept busy and need to be challenged, but they also need to be kept happy. So I'm doing lots of things with my team, like running kind of weekly quizzes where they can win like a delivery takeaway as a prize, just silly things like that, that just kind of keep the energy going. Because I think, I mean, I'm sure you'd agree, Rachel, sometimes it comes through in your output, in your creative. You know, if let's say if you're not feeling 100%, it's probably gonna impact your marketing a little bit. So keeping people happy, that's really important. And then going back to kind of targeting and how we target people, we're able to pinpoint our audiences in a really specific and scientific way, using a lot of the techniques that you kind of shared today, Rachel. And further down the funnel, where we're like I mentioned, we're working with our conversions team and our brand team and our tech team to really understand, you know, what works, and then we're fortunate to have really talented people and the scale to put those wins into practice and scale them at speed, so that, you know, whether you're a vehicle tracking client or a survey client or a hearing aids client, we're giving you the very best quality leads that we think are out there.
Yeah, I think that's super powerful. I specifically think that your point about like being in the right mood and then being in the mood to like be creative and think of creative ideas, like I totally identify with that. Like I can tell you. And I'm actually seeing another question here that kind of relates to what you were talking about. That was like, how are you and your companies dealing with the current situation? And I think that's a nice question also. So thank you for whoever asked that. Yeah, and that kind of, right, so you kind of answered that. I have a few thoughts on that as well. So I'll go ahead, and then Luke, if you have any other thoughts, feel free to answer,
Yeah, sure.
to add on. So from the Taboola perspective, we're doing a lot of things. Like I'm constantly getting work emails, but I'm also getting so many nice emails about, global meetups for employees. And, we have an all hands every single week with our management where we can ask any question that we want. And they take it really seriously. Like really, they answer any question that we ask. And we also, there was, I don't know if you saw this, like, Imagine clip that was going around that I think a bunch of celebrities were singing. So we did that in Taboola as well. So Adam Singolda, who's our founder, he was playing the piano, and different Taboolers from all over the world were kind of singing. We have daily fun emails from admin. We have cool Spotify mixes. So, Taboola is really doing a nice job kind of making people feel good and be creative as well during these days. So it's really nice to see, two companies that are really putting their people first and kind of seeing the importance in that during these specific days.
Yeah, I think we share that. I think both companies share that, and yeah, like I mentioned, the kind of stuff I'm doing within my team to help keep them engaged and motivated. But likewise, we have like our CEO Michael Texera does regular text talks where he kind of gives us an update on trading and also kind of how he sees the kind of the way forward, the way out of the situation, which is really valuable. Kind of hearing from upper management on a regular basis, it helps people kind of, it just reassures people that, firstly their jobs are safe, and secondly, like, we've got a really clear strategy for moving forward.
Mm-hmm.
And you mentioned the sing along. We also really a really good kind of engagement team put together one where the song was "I Get By with a Little Help from My Friends" by the Beatles. So lots of people across the company singing that on a really big kind of montage video. Is really nice, and yeah, that's the kind of thing that I think not only keeps people going at this time, but when it's over, we'll be looking back and thinking, yeah, actually, we did look after our people, and they'll appreciate that for it.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Okay, so we don't have so much time at all for questions. There's one more here that we can answer. How often do you recommend testing new creatives? So, testing creatives is a whole other topic. Maybe we should do another webinar on that. One thing that I always recommend to do is usually it's at least once a month to add between 5 and 10 new creative variations. Even if your campaign is doing well, we always suggest testing and making sure, before you go into that creative fatigue stage where your CTR and your conversion rate are kind of going down, make sure to always be thinking of new ideas and always adding them to your campaign. So that's usually what we recommend. Luke, I don't know if you have anything different on your end.
Well, I'd certainly second the point around even if something's working well. So probably if a campaign's going particularly well, that's more a reason to start testing other things than not. So you just kind of get ahead of the curve. Don't wait for performance to dip before testing something new. It really does vary. So you may have a creative win that's good for 6 months or more, but those are kind of fairly few and far between. I'd certainly recommend kind of at least be thinking about it on a weekly basis. And if you're happy with your current performance, then it's just a great opportunity to build up a kind of creative bank for future creatives. So that's something that we've been doing lately. We've had some of our clients have understandably had to pause for a short time over the current situation. So where that has happened, the people working on those campaigns, they're just kind of rattling out, tons and tons of really cool new creatives, so that when the client does return in the coming weeks and months, we're going to be ready to test all this new content, and that's going to put us in a really strong position moving forward.
Wow, that's so great. Okay, Luke, I had such a great time doing this webinar with you. Thank you so much for joining us. And it was so great to see like MVF, like examples from MVF, and to see, how they're similar to what's working in Taboola, and some cool new ideas to test. So thank you.
Rachel, thank you so much for having me. It's been a really fun experience, and I can't wait to join you again next time.
Yeah, sounds awesome. Okay, well, see you later. Bye. Take care of
Thanks,
yourself.
Rachel.
And
Cheers, you
everyone
too.
else.